Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, where we explore how language and culture impact global business. I'm Wendy Pease, your host and president of Rapport International. Let's get started. Welcome back. We got another episode of the Global Marketing Show here today. And as you know, or if this is your first time, you might not know, that the podcast is sponsored by Rapport International, a foreign language translation and interpretation service provider that works in over 200 languages. And from Rapport International, we always get a tidbit. So since our guest today is from Germany, we're going to do a little tidbit from Germany. If you ask a German how to find a drugstore, they may believe that you're looking to purchase illegal or illicit drugs, because in Germany you would need to ask how to find the apothecary. So it is interesting how these slight differences in language can have huge meaning differences. So today I would like to invite Andy Mura onto the Global Marketing Show. He's a growth architect who transforms high potential SaaS and tech companies into market leaders. He's an ex-founder who blends data precision with bold storytelling to build record-breaking revenue. Currently, he's head of marketing for Kertos, an all-in-one compliance solution for companies operating in Europe. So, Andy, welcome.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the discussion. So is that true? If I was walking over in Germany and asked a German speaker where the drugstore is, would they think I'm buying illicit drugs?
I'd never thought about it, but actually, yeah, it could be, right? Also, I guess a lot of German people find it funny if you were to call like a grocery store like a drugstore or something like that, right? It sounds very illegal. It's pretty much, the word drug is heavily connected to illicit substances.
Okay. So it's always good to know when the tidbits are right. Yeah, so speaking of going to stores, you told me a funny story about McDonald's that kind of leads into compliance. So you want to share the McDonald's story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. Like the story is actually connected to internationalization, right? And adapting your business to be successful in different countries. But it totally also borders compliance when it comes to obviously not only regulations, but also expectations and stuff like that. I would say that in general, McDonald's is a very good example of how to internationalize because they always leave like a lot of freedom. So they have local teams, right, in Central Europe, in Asia, and these team totally independent, and they have a lot of freedom when it comes to making decisions. Funny story for you, Wendy. I don't know if you know that, but if you come to Germany, McDonald's, like the classic golden M, right? And if you think of McDonald's, you immediately think of a golden M, the two arches on a red background, right? That's not what German people know. Like if you ask German people the McDonald's colors, it's green and yellow, because in Germany, McDonald's replaced the red in their corporate identity with green to underline that kind of like more green, healthy vibe, which is necessary to operate in Europe, right? Because fast food has bad connections to, unhealthy food. So to try and obviate this problem, like McDonald's here, they changed their corporate identity and they are a healthy, green company that uses only local produce and they only source, for example, meat and vegetables from local suppliers. So they really are a lot, focused on sustainability and so on, hence the green color, right? Instead of the typical reds we are all, used to. And the funny story you mentioned, which is, again, McDonald's is super good adapting menus for local markets and customers, also even their corporate identity and even their stores, right? If you go to France, McDonald's restaurants are super fancy, elegant, with leather couches and stuff because the typical fast food mentality would not work there. And the same thing is in Germany, people love to eat their cake with coffee in the afternoon. So they opened a lot of Mac cafes, which indirectly actually competing against Starbucks. But it's kind of like adapting that kind of local, taste and local regulations. And it's got it. So it definitely has a lot to do with also not only regulations in terms of compliance, but adapting to the market. And the funny thing is that, as you mentioned, McDonald's, they entered the European market, I guess, 40, 45 years ago, something like that, since the 70s, I guess. They wanted to enter Germany. The way they did it, in my opinion, is super interesting because they decided to go for, to take the hard way. Basically, they asked locally, what is the most conservative town and region in your country? And a lot of people obviously mentioned the South because it's historically more conservative, specifically Munich as a very tough market. And so they actually decided to start it here. And if you go now to Munich, to a special location, the south of Munich, the town, there's still the first McDonald's restaurant that was opened here with a plaque saying, okay, that was the first McDonald's. And they decided to open it here because they say, okay, since it's so hard to succeed there, if we make it there, we're going to make it everywhere else. It's kind of like, the classic, if you can make it in New York, you can make it everywhere. And that's how they approached our market. And super interesting that exactly they opened a restaurant and it's still there. And with a lot of historic photos, by the way. So it's kind of a landmark.
So when they opened 45 years ago, did they use the green then, or has that been an adjustment more
No, it's an
recently?
adjustment that came much later when Europe turned very, there's a high level of, sustainability is extremely important in the European markets and also, being environmentally friendly and everything. And so this kind of corporate social responsibility is a huge topic, and trust is directly connected also to your links to sustainability. And I would say in the 80s, there was not an issue. 90s maybe also not so much. And again, when they opened in early 70s or late 70s, I mean, that was definitely not a problem. But in recent years, it has become a huge problem that impacted all fast food chains. So they had to adapt, obviously, to the local mentality and to the values, to the local values, right? Which is kind of what happens in North America as well, right? East Coast versus West Coast and something like, completely
Right.
different mentality, and you have to adapt your corporate identity and your strategy.
So is the McDonald's food more healthy now, or it's just sustainable because they buy the vegetables and meats locally?
Well, you're talking to a marketer, so I can only say that it is what you believe it is.
That's true. That is a good answer from a marketer. It's all
Correct.
relative.
Exactly, exactly. It's perception, right? We are talking about perception.
Right. Okay, so now tell us about your company that you're working for, Kertos. So compliance. I just think about compliance in one country alone, which can be overbearing. But your company works within compliance across multiple countries. Tell me what Kertos does, and then what you're working on now.
Yes, absolutely. So compliance is a super important topic. Again, we're talking about being trustworthy. So being compliant in the past, I would say compliance has always been something like you have to do it. It's like paying taxes, right? Nobody wants to take care of it. It's a lot of extra work for nothing. Oh my God. But over time, that has changed dramatically. We all live in a society, right, in which we have to trust companies to work with, for example, our data, right? So I download now McDonald's app, or I download any app, or I work, I subscribe to Netflix or something like that. So I entrust these huge companies with my data, credit card information, bank information, my personal data, right? And all of a sudden, these companies have the honor to manage my data. So managing my data and having a customer is not something that you should take for granted, right? It's something you have to earn. And the fact that you are compliant in terms of like how you manage your IT security systems, how you manage your, how you protect your data, that's something that has to do a lot with customer care and customer respect. If you're a respectful company so if you expect to be trusted by your customers, you also have to show that you care. And showing that you care means also that you take all precautions and you have great systems in place to take care of my data and information. So our company allows companies of every size, right, to achieve this level of compliance in terms of IT security or data privacy, so in different areas, and at the same time to quickly gain evidence, right? So obviously it's nice to have like either a certificate or any kind of proof that shows that you are compliant with specific regulations. And that's a sign of trust to your customers, meaning, hey, it's a seal guarantee. If you work with me, trust me, our systems are put in place correctly and we take care of our information security properly. So on the one hand, what we do now is really providing this kind of like signal and for companies that want to operate, that want to work with customers, large customers or partners. But at the same time, a lot of companies are regulated by law to be compliant with certain regulations. There are a lot of new directives every year, right? It could be SOC 2, ISO 27001, or it could be EU AI Act. There are so many, and even local regulations like in Germany for financial companies, DORA, or in the automotive sector, you have TISAX. So there are so many regulations, directives. So on the one hand, companies have to be certified to obviously operate in certain areas. And in some other cases, these kind of like certificates or just like level of compliance allows you to reach bigger customers or work with partners that would not work with you without knowing if you are serious about your IT security and information security.
It's an interesting message because companies all around the world are becoming more aware of this. It was kind of like the sustainability 10 years ago. Now it's the data compliance. It seems to be
Correct.
the big thing. So as you're marketing your services, you can market internationally because it's for anybody coming in to do business in Europe. How does your marketing message have to change, or maybe it doesn't, because you're marketing to people from different cultures?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So on the one hand, as you mentioned, like different countries value different processes in a different way. So it's kind of like you give importance to things that maybe other countries are not so interested in, right? It's part maybe of the culture of, or sometimes historic reasons, right? If you had data breaches or something like that. So compliance is a topic that can be approached from the customer point of view, but also from the top line point of view, right? So more revenue by having larger customers, more partners. So we have different angles that we can evaluate for different countries to see what is the message that sticks, right? Also within the same country, right, you can have different target groups like within your ICP, like smaller companies that, for example, are more excited about the fact that we allow companies to be certified very quickly compared to, classic consulting firms and so on. And we are also much, much, much cheaper. So like small companies value that a lot versus larger companies that prefer, a message of quality. So when you market your product to different groups, it doesn't matter if it's different markets, but sometimes even within the same market, but different ICPs, you can take different benefits and present them in, from a different perspective. which means that nothing changes, right? We're always honest with what we can achieve, but we just underline different benefits based on what your expectations are. And then it's all about, localization in some countries because in Europe with English you can market really well, for example, in the Nordics, UKI, so United Kingdom and Ireland, but other countries really expect the whole messaging and communication to be in their own local language. They don't accept English as an international language.
So we see companies that either say, we're going to create a global brand and messaging, and then they localize or translate it and they push it down from the top out. We see other companies that say, we're going to let our local markets control that. And then, and there's benefits and minuses to both. If it's centrally controlled, sometimes the message may flop on the local market, but if you let the local market control it, then you may have 5 different Spanish translations because each country is doing their own, and you've got completely convoluted messaging that doesn't roll up to a global brand, so you've lost that halo. So when you think about this, the different ICPs, the different cultures, how do you use, if I go back to your data precision and bold storytelling, like how do you develop a strategy on meeting all those various communication needs?
Yes, it's extremely important to always have in mind what is the concept of umbrella campaign, which is what you define when you have like a key, like what is the key, or actually I should say what are the key branding elements that you want to maintain no matter what, right? There are 2, maximum 3 pillars that are connected to your brand that you always have to keep in mind, and you
Can you
want
give
them to be.
examples of yours, or bring it down into your company?
Yeah, for example, no matter in what
Okay.
country, something like that, something will never be disconnected from our brand is the fact that we put information security first and certification second, right? So meaning that we take things seriously, we take information security seriously. We don't just allow you to, find a shortcut to be certified. We value, and that's a pillar that we would never, ever, ever change, no matter what country we are. At the same time is our legal background, the fact that our platform is based on our team is a team of legal experts that actually created the whole product and manages the product. So these are aspects or key branding elements that you don't want to change. This kind of like your authority in the field and the fact that you are a serious competitor in the market, that you put quality first, and these are things you cannot compromise on. So you want that to be, no matter what customer group you talk to or what country or anything. When you move on from these big concepts, the granular messaging then can be adapted. And I'm pretty much in favor of local teams actually being more in the lead in this case, because of course you know your culture, you know what rules you can break, what puns you can use, play on words, funny things that you want to you can leverage, and also what pitfalls, right? Let's not forget how many brands launched products in different countries that had a very bad name, like a blunder, because it was. And so local teams always know best, but somebody always has to have an overview and make sure that everything is compliant with the brand and with the main brand message, because no matter where in the world, right, again we mentioned McDonald's, true, when you go to India they don't serve any beef, obviously they have chicken maharaja, but the whole CI is still McDonald's. And
Right.
KFC in Japan, it looks like KFC, it's very different, but you still have the same vibes. And Disney is everywhere in the world, pretty much, a brand
Right.
connected to family and fun.
So if I take you back to, I love your 2 pillows, info security and certificates. Can you give us examples with how you might work with local teams, or what you've had, what you allow, and then how you have that oversight? I always love getting the specific stories because it's
Yeah,
so insightful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Say, for example, I just give an example, right? You enter a market like, yeah, the North American market. We know we have competitors in North America here that have very bold claims, like we get you SOC 2 certified in 2 or 3 weeks, right? So the local team would be tempted to match that kind of statement just to be competitive, right? That would be the
Right.
first, and that would be where I or anybody in our company that is responsible more for, thinking about, our brand and our image, we would immediately pull the brake and say, nope, we're not going to match that statement because we know it's unrealistic, right? And it's not the promise that we would like to make to our customers. That's a kind of like you crossed that line. You can be funny, everything is aligned with our brand, right? Dynamic, modern, but we cannot, cross that line.
We're not going
That's
to
where I
push the
would
limit. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, and not just to match a competitor's claims that cannot hold
Yeah.
true. And that's exactly how you do that. So every message has to be filtered and say, does it go against our core values? If it doesn't, it's green light. I mean, no problem. Even if it's kind of cheeky or you want to test something new, a little bit out, out of the box, totally fine, right? Experimentation is okay, and marketing cannot be boring. Otherwise, you're not doing marketing correctly.
That is so true. That's so true. So, what do you do as a leader of marketing when you've got somebody who develops a French campaign and, that's not a language you speak? How would you be able to review that?
Yeah, correct. Well,
Yeah.
lucky for me, I can speak a little bit of French, but that's a good example no matter what.
I was trying
We
to
can,
come up with something you might not, but yeah.
I know, right? No, but no, so we work with copywriters and stuff like that come from the local market. Nowadays, life is so much easier. Anything you have, you can plug it into an LLM and ask the LLM to analyze it for you. Not only from just like, please translate that. You can use Google for this. You don't need an LLM, but you can also ask deeper questions like, do you see any hidden messages between the line, right? Pretend you are a person, in the case of a French messaging, like you were born in Paris and you are an expert copywriter. What is your perception of this message? What emotions are connected to these words, right? We all connect specific emotions to local words, right? It's the same reason why a lot of people who learn a second language, they say, I cannot express my feelings I can talk about everything, but when it comes, about feelings, I need to use my local language. Or that's the reason why, for example, when they're mad and they fight against, they start using their own language, right? It's so
Yeah.
because the words are not just descriptive, right? They are connected to emotions. The day you used it with, we all have like some emotional connections to words we used with somebody in the kitchen, in a conversation, in the car going somewhere or on vacation. And those kind of emotions are connected to these words and also hidden meanings that maybe others cannot see, or perception, or like things that we take for granted because it's part of our culture, right? And everybody knows if you say that sentence, it's a reference to, I don't know, that movie. Or so if I say I'll be back, everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? But
Yeah.
but if you use the same sentence, for example, in Thailand, people would like, I have no idea why you're laughing, right? It's kind of funny because and that's why nowadays it's a lot easier to also check for hidden messages, meanings, or analyze your copy. Funny enough, not only in a foreign language, right? You should always do it with your own language as well before shooting out a campaign. You say, can this message trigger any negative emotions that I'm not aware of? Because we all also have a different background, right? What if what you're saying is suddenly triggering some specific emotions you don't want to? And this holds true especially in a different culture where rules are completely different, and you don't really know what works and what doesn't. So nowadays it's a lot easier. I guess in the past you had to rely on your teams and consultants and experts and stuff like that, and say, okay, explain it to me. Why did you choose this? And now you can also have your personal assistant analyze that for you. It's really, really easy.
Yeah, that is so interesting to hear you say that. This is the first time that I've heard of that because at Rapport International, we do a translation, and then sometimes clients like to review it in their own internal team, and they'll make changes, and then we'll bring it back to the translator, and we can get the explanation of, yeah, that change is fine. It's interchanging two words that are fine. Sometimes they'll come back and say, well, that's grammatically wrong, or that's changed the meaning because of this. And so you've got two humans looking for that hidden meaning. If you go in and the LLM tells you that there's a hidden meaning or something's going on, can it explain enough so you can go back to the original translator and discuss it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially because you can interpret different nuances, right? We have some specific internal also tools that we developed obviously for copywriting and stuff with specific training and so on. But it's kind of interesting that they are good at explaining nuances for people who are not trained, right? It's the same reason, like for example, when if I were to say, "Hey, we got to trash that," or if I say you should dispose of it, it's the same thing. But the perception of the same sentence to a native speaker is completely different. But if you use, for example, a generic translator or not a copywriter, somebody like you say, "Oh yeah, I can translate that," and then you translate it one way or the other, it's not the same thing. Like meaning wise, yes, grammatically, okay, but the impact is totally different. So, and that's the kind of that's why I'm still in favor of human in the loop. So, of course, you can localize every campaign within LLM, right, or even Google Translate if you want to, but it's not the same thing, and you miss on so many things, and then it becomes in translation, and then if it's funny, it's okay because people will talk about it, so mistakes are welcome. But if it's not a funny mistake, it's very bad, right? So again, think about McDonald's. They say I'm loving it, so it doesn't make sense actually, but it works because it's they use this kind of expression, right? So if it's a happy accident or you want that to be in that way, it's okay. Otherwise, no, it's much better to have local people. They know where.
I still think it's better to get the humor when you're trying to get the humor, but if you create a
Correct.
goof and you get the humor, yeah, I guess in pure marketing, pure PR, any visibility is good if you go back to the basic textbook, but you want to be remembered favorably. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. That's so
And that's
fascinating.
why I remember I worked on some, when I still worked in advertising, I worked on some international campaigns for Mini, the car, right? And every local team was given a huge book. It was really a very large book with all rules, right? Branding rules, what rules you can break
Right.
and you cannot break, and you have to stick to. But beyond that, happy to experiment. So, and that's how more or less I still think it works. Of course, technology makes things faster and easier, more iterations and so on, but I still value people and their wit. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people can come up with things that a machine would never, ever, ever come up with,
All
no
right,
matter
because it's
what.
new and it's creative. They
Correct.
can parse out stuff that's already happened, but where does that creative or where does that catch from? Yeah. So that's a interesting use for an LLM. And you must have a secure LLM that you're running it through then? Or do you run it
Correct.
out?
We have our own systems that we developed in-house actually, and it's
Okay. I would imagine so as a security company. And then I start to wonder about the cultural, like if you think about reputations of culture, or stereotypes is the word I'm looking for. Germans have a stereotype of being very buttoned up and rule following and appropriate. Do you find that companies knowing that you're a German company and you're in security, that helps? Like, would you push that in the United States or France or any of the Nordic countries, that because you're German, therefore it's going to be better? Or do you try to look local?
It's very interesting because it depends, right? What kind of reputation? For example, Italian shoes are super popular in China or Japan. So it's if you say my shoes come from Italy, automatically people think they're better than anything else, right? And in some areas, obviously, there's a certain brand association with the concept of German quality, which is mostly connected, I would say, to either operating machines or
Cars.
manufacturing in general. Yes, a good example. I love your example because I would like to underline the word perception because if you look at the statistics, right, BMWs are not reliable at all, right? If you look at number of hours that cars spend in workshops. But again, that's marketing and communication, right? Everybody still thinks, oh, okay, yeah, BMW, right? It's good quality, Mercedes, and so on and so on. And then if you look at the stats and you compare German cars to Japanese cars, I mean, no chance. And that's why it's good that you have that kind of heritage, like the legacy of German quality. It's a seal. But I would say you cannot play it everywhere. So different countries have different stereotypes of other countries, right? And in some areas, it's perceived as a seal of guarantee. In other areas could be perceived like maybe a lack of flexibility, which is not true, right? But in
Oh,
some countries, they say, "Oh, do we really want to do business with this German company?" Because in our minds means more, bureaucracy, lack of flexibility, whatever. Again, we're talking about perception because it's totally not true. But if you think that your customer might end up being stuck with that thought, it's better that you avoid the whole thing altogether. So in some areas, yes, you can totally leverage that. And it also changes historically, right? Based on, political situation, what, happens in the world. So,
yeah.
but definitely, I would say German people, at least when it comes to being thorough, that's very true. That's very true. And that's why you can always play thoroughness as a card and say, yeah, maybe the whole concept of quality is not, so universal, but when it comes about thinking twice before doing something, it's true. So, and you see that also in the market. Same that's why it's also more difficult to convince German customers that you are a good partner for them because they really think twice before, working with a new company or, who are you? Can I trust you? It's a bit more like there's a lot of resistance, but once you pass that, it's a super loyal market, for example, whereas other areas in the world, it's easier to convince customers. You get through pretty easily because they are more willing to experiment. They are risk prone, right? German people are very cautious, and in other countries they're super risk prone. Yeah, yeah, let's do it. And you start a project, and then for whatever reason they lose interest or momentum's gone and they churn or whatever. And that's something that doesn't happen in Germany. If the customer chooses you, it's because they really respect you and they want to work with you for a long time. So
Whereas in the US, that's opposite. Oh yeah, let's give that a
exactly.
try. Yeah, no, it didn't work out. I'm moving on.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have that kind of mentality everywhere, which is like exactly risk prone. Let's see what happens, which opens the door to a lot of opportunities, right? But at the same time brings in more instability. And the same reason why when you get a job, for example, in Germany, it's usually, if you want, it's something you can have for life if you want, right? It's not so much because if an employer entrusts you is because they really checked thoroughly. People are very thorough here.
Yes, yes.
So
You know what? I could keep talking to you, but we're running out of time here, and so
sure.
you know I've got some questions for you. So yeah, it's time to ask you, what's your favorite foreign word?
I would have to pick a German word, right? We
Okay.
talked about it. There are so many funny words in Germany, right? It's like we talked about it. Like there's a word which is Heimweh, which is kind of like when you're homesick. But there's also Fernweh, which is a word which is the opposite. Is when are you long for foreign countries. It's the exact opposite of homesick. You're home and you have this Fernweh is like you want to go far away in exotic countries. And one of the best German words I would say that I learned when I moved here is Treppenwitz. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Treppenwitz is two words together, stairs and joke. And now the meaning. So we've had a nice chat right now. And you asked me a lot of great questions, right? But I'm pretty sure in 20 minutes from now, when I hang up and we say goodbye, I will think of a better answer to your question that I didn't think right there, right? And that's the kind of the German people have a word for it, it's a Treppenwitz, which is what you should have said at the moment, but you didn't think about it. Imagine if you are arguing with somebody and then you go somewhere and 10 minutes later, that was the best way to get back at them. That would have been the best answer to my test. That would have been the best answer to my podcast question. And it always comes 10 minutes later. And that's why it's called Treppenwitz, because you go down the stairs. And once you reach, you go and you are, you reach the first floor, you say, I should have said that.
Well, I can assure you, you had, I thought you answered the questions perfectly. And I thought it was fascinating to weave in all the fast food restaurants and around the world and the differences, and then to talk about security. So it kind of, it's from one side of the spectrum to the other in marketing. So I thought that was fascinating.
Absolutely.
So I hope you don't have any Treppenwitz feelings afterwards.
We need an English word for it. I'll think about it.
Hey, you know what? I just say adopt the German one. We have a
True.
lot of foreign words in English, so
Sure.
I think that's a good one that we need to add in. So that will definitely make my Excel spreadsheet of words we need to add into our language.
I totally
Yeah, so
agree.
Andy, where can people reach you if they want to talk more or find out more about your company?
Sure. Please reach on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I'm not very active in my email inbox, as my colleagues know. So it's just like it might take ages. So yeah, feel free to connect with me and chit chat. I love, to talk about business in general, learn more about other businesses, connect with other people, and exchange experiences, but also talking about compliance and really helping companies, achieve full compliance quickly and efficiently. And so always happy always open to conversations.
Okay. And so Andy can be looked up on LinkedIn. It's spelled Andy, Andy, and then Mura, Mura. And then the company he works for is Kertos, Kertos. So I hope you do look him up if you have any questions. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all your insights and wisdom. It's I always learn something, and I definitely learned some insights today and some good ways of thinking about how to globalize and localize. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, okay. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Remember to give us a 5-star ranking or, a 4-star even if you enjoy the podcast, and follow us so you can hear about the episodes when we launch. So thanks so much for tuning in, and certainly share this episode with somebody you think would be interested. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Global Marketing Show. We started this podcast to capture the stories of people who do global marketing and work for companies that export, since those companies have higher revenues, higher profits, higher valuations, higher salaries, and more stability, according to the U.S. Department of Commerce. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And if you know somebody who would be a good guest, introduce them to me, your host, Wendy Mackenzie Pease. If you'd like to learn more about global marketing or language translation and interpretation, visit Rapport International's Resource Center at www.rapporttranslations.com. Au revoir, hasta luego, ciao for now.